YUNKJunk!
Hey, welcome to Tubby Talk. Today we're going to be talking about Star Wars / Star Trek style stuff with Chris, Terry, and Steve. Here we go.
All right.
So you guys brought in a topic today.
Yeah, we came in, we were just like, having a nerd discussion as we often do, and we went to one of the primal nerd discussions.
Yeah.
Star Trek versus Star Wars. We were talking about some of the Star Trek games that we used to play, of which there aren't a ton.
Yeah, all three of them.
But I think off the bat, we should just say, are you a Star Trek or a Star Wars guy?
Sure.
I'm probably more of a Trek guy growing up. I have a feeling.
Yeah, for sure I'm a Wars guy.
Yeah. And Steve,
I'm the Star Trek guy.
yeah.
I grew to love Star Trek later. And now
Same with Wars.
and now they're like becoming the same thing. Any sort
kind
of
of-
modern stuff like Star Trek, they're like, let's be a little more Star Warsy, and then Star Wars just flew off a cliff. So I don't even know what's happening anymore in that. But
Star Wars flew up its own, or down its own Starlight pit.
it's true. It's true. Yeah, and we're just getting digested forever with this terrible content that's being put out. Although I haven't watched Ahsoka, but I haven't. That says something about the brand that I am not watching it.
Obi-Wan, which I liked Obi-Wan. Okay, it was silly, and Boba Fett was terrible.
Yeah,
Very bad.
Obi-Wan was an excellent movie. If you ever get a chance, watch the YouTube version,
But like
where they cut it down into a 2-hour jaunt instead of 6 episodes. But I'm getting off the point. This is the gaming show, not the Star Trek Star Wars show. All right, so I don't remember any Star Trek games.
Well, there were a lot. There were a bunch on PC, but then there was an NES one, which was very bad. And there was a Super Nintendo. There were two of them on the Super
couple of them,
Nintendo.
I believe.
There were at the very least there was a Star Trek Next Generation one, which
one
was
Deep
pretty
Space
bad,
Nine one.
and a Deep Space Nine one, which was it was a side scroller where you're Cisco running around a space station like jumping. Why is it a platformer with Cisco?
Everything about the game feels a lot like Alone in the Dark. I think that's the right game.
Like
right?
the original side scroller.
Out of this world, yeah.
Out of this world.
Yeah, it feels like
Yeah.
out of this world.
It's
I
like
love
a
that
worse
game.
Out of this world. Out of this world is great.
Yeah. So I believe I remember a Star Trek on Atari where it was just the ship was like a Pac-Man type character.
Oh, I
It just
feel
went
like
up or down and
That
could
feels
shoot.
like familiar. I haven't heard of that.
I feel like you fought like a giant face,
Yeah, that's
which would later become Andros.
I was gonna say, what you just talking about?
Yeah.
Star Wars.
Are we talking about Star Fox?
Star Fox.
No, Sinistar.
Sinistar.
Wouldn't that just be Sinistar?
Yeah.
I guess so.
But now it's like our Star Trek versus Star Wars versus Star Fox. I like where this is going.
Okay, we found a
Definitely a
home.
Star Fox guy as
Yeah.
well.
Boy, okay, put that in your ranking.
Yeah.
I might be Star Fox over.
You're
No.
about to put it over Wars.
I'm gonna put it over Trek, but I'm not gonna put it over Wars.
Oh, that's another thing where you'd be like, well, the modern ones, not so good.
The modern witch.
Star Fox.
True. Well, again, this is actually perfect for the discussion because something that infected Star Trek and Star Wars and has always been there is other fans telling you should you or should you not watch this one because you can have a greater experience with all of these titles if you skip a couple and if you listen to the nerd base of like even the proper order to watch it if we're talking Star Wars.
Yeah.
Star Trek too, I
Yeah,
guess.
there's the whole website's dedicated to which, if we want to watch in chronological order of in universe, chronological order in real world release date.
That's a heck of a journey. You'd be like, I'm going to watch this whole series and then this movie and then this whole series.
And then half this episode.
Are there any games, not to just interject questions, but I'm going to interject questions.
Yeah.
Are there any games where you get to star as either Captain Kirk or Jean-Luc Picard?
I don't believe either directly.
That's insane.
There was a game came out when all the VR, like PS5 and Xbox Series X came out with like the VR stuff. Star Trek Bridge Commander. I think it's also on Oculus.
yeah.
Or
yeah.
works with Oculus.
That one's supposed to be neat. I haven't played
Yeah,
it, but
and that's like the bridge of the Enterprise D, which was
Just the way
Picard's
the windows are
Enterprise.
set up, that
Yeah.
would be awesome.
So I guess you could role play as Captain Picard. I don't think you're nominally Captain Picard.
that was supposed to be a good game, and I wish, because VR makes you jump through hoops, so I never really tried it, but it sounds like something like you could have other friends playing, and you're all on the bridge, and that's the engineer, and
It's
that's
not like
the
you had
weapons
to.
guy.
The game
Yeah.
only works if you have like 5
What's
people.
it called? Can Dylan look it up?
Star Trek Bridge Commander.
Yeah. So that one, I mean, to me, I want a Star Trek game that gives you control of the ship and the systems, and you can divert energy from the warp cores to the shields and that
11
kind of
years
stuff.
ago. Yeah, that sounds about right.
11 years ago?
Yeah, I didn't realize it was that long.
Well, he's clicking on the 3 years ago. But maybe it's the same.
Yeah, we'll take a look.
Okay, this is the single player mode. I didn't.
So which character is that? No.
Complete single player movie. Okay, so it's
So just kind of click forward a little bit. Let's see if we
the
can get
single
some
player.
gameplay
Just
action.
they're editing together the.
those are some low poly ships. Whoa, my God!
Whoa!
Okay, see that was Picard, right? She's not playing Picard.
It
but that's
does look
Data right
11
there.
years old. I'll give it that.
Wait, this isn't what you were talking about, is
Yeah,
it?
yeah, this is it. It was VR. So
So yeah, VR.
What the hell is
yeah,
that?
that's Picard. So you're not playing Picard in single player.
It looks like it's building the Quake 3 engine.
Yeah, this is very a couple steps beyond GoldenEye, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But not many.
Oh,
the Rock.
Oh, it's Enterprise E.
Yeah, Dylan, see if there's a Star Trek for Atari. I'm almost positive
Or
there
Voyager?
is.
No, that's
No,
the
that's
E.
the-
But
that's
why
the-
was Picard not on it? 'Cause he was talking on the view screen. That's weird.
What are they going into? What's happening?
This is Starbase.
There's just so many questions. Okay. I didn't know a star base had a dock for a whole starship.
Yeah, the ships go all the way into them. They're huge.
Wow. So I didn't know it looked like that either.
Just kind of click through a little bit.
Oh,
yeah, here we go.
There you go.
So this is the one that I've heard of.
Yeah. What?
See?
Oh, this is not too dissimilar from the one I played.
Yeah, the
though.
PC.
So
Talking
did
about-
Star Trek, who beat who? Did Star Trek beat Star Wars to the punch when it came to gaming?
That's
I would think so if this is on Atari, because I don't remember a Star Wars game on Atari.
So I think bigger nerds were into Star Trek, and the people who are at the beginning of like computer programming, they were more
That was
into
Sega.
Trek. So they probably made fan games and stuff first, if
Yeah.
I had to guess. But they were probably worse. Because the thing is,
Whoa, did you see that?
Overlay for the.
Can you back that up?
I didn't realize Sega made games for the Atari, or it made games that were on the Atari.
Perfect.
Even
Watch this.
That's awesome.
oh yeah, the overlay. Yeah.
Yeah, it overlays for lots of games for the 2600.
I didn't know that.
They had one you needed for the ColecoVision, because the ColecoVision had a numpad beneath, and you didn't know what the heck they each did. So each game came with its own overlay, and everyone lost them. But yeah, this is about as good as Star Trek games got, unfortunately. Because the one I was showing Steve today, it's a fan game called WinTrek, and it was on Windows 3.
Let's see what it is.
Yeah, look up WinTrek.
I do like the tracking of when the sprite rotates, it changes the viewpoint in the bottom.
It looks
third.
pretty good for a 2600 game.
Yeah,
honestly.
that seems like a lot of advanced programming for an Atari game.
Yeah. But WinTrek was made by some fans, and it was all about like you're the original Enterprise, with Kirk, and just charting courses around the galaxy, blowing up Klingons.
There we go. 1992.
Yeah.
Looks like we're having some mouse trouble.
If this was Star Trek, you could just tell the computer to play.
That's true.
Computer, hit that thingy.
And if it was Star Wars, you would have to
Yeah.
yell at a droid until it decided to.
So this is completely. Did you ever use?
just a blast from the past.
Did you use Windows 3.1 at any point?
Yeah.
so you-
What's that? Like 1993, 1995 ish?
Oh, before 95. Yeah, before 95.
Yes, I distinctly remember that. I remember a game called Jez Ball that was like super fun.
So I didn't
Part of
have
the Minesweeper.
I didn't have like a computer that could do this stuff for a while. And by the time I got one, it was a hand-me-down that was old, but it had WinTrek on it. And I was like, what is this? And this is the sort of game that would be distributed with a floppy disk, like friend to friend. Like, I don't think this is really sold. This is original shareware.
This is just awesome. Yeah, shareware. I haven't heard that word in a long time. But it was all like, just even look at the windows.
Oh yeah, look at them.
I
Look
love
at
it.
them. And so you'd have the dilithium crystals. That's how far you could go. And look, you had to set the speed and the course, and the ship would go there, and whatever would happen. But you had to manually like set the course compass directions like by degrees. It's so cool. This is fun.
Yes. And it's funny. The reason this is fun is because Star Trek was for nerds and Star Wars was for geeks. Right? Essentially,
I think
it's
that's
always
fair
thought of
assessment,
that,
yeah.
that a nerd always has that level of intelligence to go along with the obsession of whatever they're into. Whereas a geek is all in on the thing, but might not also be able to re-engineer a computer.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So yeah, this
More
is
geeks today than nerds.
And
Nerds make money today.
in Stranger Things terms, what's his name? Dustin would be the nerd, and the rest of them would be geeks.
Yes, I agree. Because D&D and Star Trek go hand in hand with being a nerd, as does making zillions of dollars later in life on technology.
Later in their life relative to the 80s.
Correct.
Because that bubble's kind of seems like bursting now, at least for pure nerds.
So look at this. You can actually, there's a computer console. You typed commands to the computer in this game to tell it to do things.
Oh, neato.
And this is just made for the love of the game, basically. Like that's the only reason it's here. You could, whenever a game lets you divert power from the shields.
Yeah.
I'm in. So this is like my favorite Star Trek game of all time. What this guy is playing.
This is very StarCrafty.
Yeah, it is kind of StarCrafty.
Which makes
very
sense for
fiddly
you.
and
Because I see the strategy. I see
It's close to a spreadsheet game, so Chris is all about it.
Yes. Oh, you could do this. You could probably port this to Excel, and it would be good. But yeah, so I love this game. It's still my favorite Star Trek game. Like, it's technically not a Star Trek game, but it's called YUNKJunk. Come on, guys.
See, here's the thing, and it's funny, when we started this conversation, I was thinking this, but you kind of just confirmed it, I remember the original online internet games were text-based games. The original video games, right?
MUDs.
Were text-based. Yes.
Yes.
And that's somewhere where I could see Star Trek
Oh, Star Trek would be
having it being in a big bad way like king of the text-based games.
I wish I had come across a Star Trek MUD during like the 2-year phase I had playing MUDs in 2000.
You might as well look up Star Trek MUD. You probably need Google for this one.
Multi-user dungeon.
Yeah, and there's got to be a bunch of those. And I'm glad we're starting with Trek because there's so much more wars to talk about. But Trek, like, it's interesting because these are,
They're time capsules to the time.
time capsules and they're scrappy,
Yeah.
right? Like, this is just like someone made it.
Just like Star Trek used to be. It never had like huge backing monetarily compared to Star Wars. Movies versus films versus films versus syndication,
So it's not coming up.
You might have to Google, buddy.
Yeah, there may not be a video. Because who does a video, like, let's play of a MUD, like just watching someone type?
MUD?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Star Trek themed MUDs, Reddit. Or
I mean, there's probably a bunch ongoing
Trek
right
Mush.
now.
There you go. That's probably
Yeah,
the big one.
Trek Mush sounds good. That's cool.
All right, so this is a MUD. Explain this to me. What the hell is
Still
this?
open now. Okay, so MUD is a text-based game, a multi-user game, so it's something you can play with other people online in real time.
It stands for multi-user dungeon specifically.
And so basically, normally there's when you log in. Everybody has a unique login, and you're set permissions. So you can be like an administrator. We can control change the rules of the game, or you're a player.
So a dungeon master, or
And so I'm trying to parse this screen to figure out how this would work explicitly, but it looks like you would change different functions. So like you see autopilot destination, you would change the XYZ coordinates, and it would change the heading of the ship. And they probably have one person do each color-coded section, like that's part of their job.
Yeah.
So everything yellow is part of the con officer who's monitoring the ship status, and then the pilot is doing all the autopilot stuff. And yeah, this looks really, really fiddly, more so than most months I've played, but also looks like something a Star Trek fan would make.
That there's an X, Y, and Z coordinate too. Like that tells you how deep we're going here.
Yeah, especially because in most Star Wars and Trek, they don't really use the Z-axis in space very much.
No.
Because it just clutters the screen most of the time.
It makes it less fun to play, probably. But multi-user dungeon is usually text operated. It describes to you what you're doing, and you type in what you would do. And this is like in the era of like, you look north, there's a forest. Walk north. You walk north. This is what you see. Like it's a MUD is that, but with other people in it.
And is that user generated or algorithmic?
It's user
generated. Yeah. Somebody goes through and makes all of those rooms and little caves. You could probably make a really good AI generated one or a procedurally generated one, but then you could also just make. That's what Dwarf Fortress is. I'm pretty sure it's a PC game that's procedurally generated. I think it was one of the first ones.
It's not one of the first, but it's one of the most prolific, and it's text based as well.
Interesting.
Very inscrutable.
Yeah, it's like ASCII art text based.
They just came out with a Steam version that has graphics, which some of the people were like, "Oh my God, you broke the game," and some other people were like, "Oh, now I can enjoy it because now it looks like things."
Interesting.
So they should make a Star Wars one of those where you're mining.
Star Fortress.
Oh, I'm like, is that what it's called? Well, Chris just named it. Somebody working on Star Fortress.
Yeah.
Well,
TM.
but this speaks exactly to what we're talking about. Of like, this is for a certain breed of person, you know, because you have to
For a nerd.
Yeah, this has to be interesting to you.
Yeah.
Enough that it's, you know, dare I say, obsessive. You know, if the Z-axis is involved, yeah.
It's not something you play for like 5 minutes at a time.
You have to have fun, not with a joystick going up and down, left and right, but telling the joystick to go up, down,
Yeah,
left, and
exactly.
right.
Yeah, and like the main goal of Mudge was to make a role-playing interface. So like you would use this to travel the ship to, like, say you're going to planet Vulcan, and then you can meet up with other players who are on Vulcan, who are role-playing as Vulcans.
Dylan, can you see if there's a Star Wars mud? And you can just Google exactly Star Wars mud.
Be funny, like the mud of Tatooine is referred to as.
Give me that top one. Oh, one above that. Because this looks like, okay.
There you go. Before you lies the great pit of cartoon.
Carcoon.
Home to the dreaded Sarlacc. Yeah, so it describes everything.
Sarlacc pit, nice. Cred.
Oh, and there are 4 obvious exits: north, east, north, south, and west. So yeah, you get to walk in a cardinal direction and interact with various things.
Yeah, and there's like different colors. A nasty acidic smell is drifting out of the depths of the Sarlacc. So these are like steps, or is this like other people posting stuff?
So those are further instructions. Like they might be color coded because like the yellow tells you that it's something you have to deal with. Like if you don't leave the room, you might start taking damage or something like that.
Out of curiosity, can you scroll down and see what the recent changes are? I want to see. March 2023.
This is still active.
This is active
The
development.
Star Trek one was also, it is currently in play testing, so it's newer.
This is why I love Star Wars and Star Trek people. They will never stop.
Just to Vaynon's Bloodhound buff now lasts 10 minutes.
This also says something about fan bases and the fan bases of these. We're glued on to our original stuff. You know, most people are there for Kirk and Picard through Next Gen, a couple of the movies. I wouldn't say JJ's stuff really spoke to any of the classic original.
Not as much.
Fans.
Like I see, especially now, I see a lot of people like expressing, you know, revisiting them and saying, "Oh, these are," especially in light of like some of the some of the not as good Star Trek shows that are out now. It's better than Star Trek Discovery.
But Star Wars the same way in that, you know, we're never going to let go of our original trilogy.
Well, because those,
you know, and
those
clearly,
those were set up, you know, our love of the world, and then everything else that should expand on the world doesn't seem like it's expanding on it so much as imploding on it or so.
Yeah, so they set up this world and we were very comfortable with it, and then they're like, well, here's some new aspects of that world. And we're like, that doesn't fit with my perception of what that world was.
Kind of true.
That's totally wrong. Yeah. But Star Wars does lend itself better to video games as well, because Star Trek, at least in the next gen era when we grew up, it was more about diplomacy and about, you know, moral and ethical quandaries, and that's not a video game.
Which would make really good video
Apparently.
games. Well, that makes really good video games now. Like Baldur's Gate 3 is all about that. Starfield has some aspect of that. They just don't do it with the Star Trek license, and I don't know where the disconnect is.
I'll tell you, it's Gene Roddenberry's not included anymore.
Well, he died.
Well, yeah, we gotta get him back.
he
Where's
died.
AI Gene Roddenberry though? That doesn't make sense to me, because if I was a nerd and I was inventing AI, one of the first things I would do is bring back one of my heroes.
The more you learn about Gene Roddenberry, the more you realize you probably don't want him as an AI.
I do. The guy almost died in a plane crash and then started.
Yeah, and then
that's awesome.
And he started, and then he was very, very sexist and a little bit racist, but not much. He was not personally racist.
Well, his show wasn't.
The show wasn't, no.
Like the work, I would say, though, okay, like fair enough. I love the work he created is no longer being used as the source material. I think that would be fair to say.
It is, though. It's not really fair to say, because it is still being used and expounded on as a source material.
I don't know. I just think George and Gene are getting screwed nowadays. I think they came up with great concepts.
Oh, I'm so sad on my piles of money.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. The real person lost out here was DC Fontana, but I'm not going to get into that right now.
But yeah, Star Wars action element oriented, right? Like it's all about, I'm having a space laser battle. I'm shooting things. I'm blowing up stuff. You know,
the hero's journey.
The hero's journey. It's a simpler story,
It was literally, what was it? Joseph Campbell's The Heart of Darkness?
Hero
other-
with a Thousand Faces.
Yeah, hell no.
But it plays more into, it's more digestible. So
I agree.
tons of video games to this day being made. What are some of your favorite Star Wars video games?
It's going to be hard to say favorite because I gotta say none of them were that good.
Yeah.
But I think we can all take a minute and discuss the beauty that was Shadows of the Empire for Nintendo 64. Can we see that real quick, Dylan?
Shadows of the
Empire.
Yeah,
That's
that's
one of the launch titles for the N64.
I believe it was recently released on the Switch in the Switch Online.
Interesting.
Online.
Okay.
But that is
Give
one.
me that long play there. Actually, give me the trailer. That one's fine. That review.
I guess I'll give you that one.
The issue with this one, like,
Dylan, feel free to put in a blurb right there of like Terry's being a jerk. Editor not happy.
so have you played this game since it was?
Yeah.
No. No. Well, that's a lie. I did definitely, when the N64 emulator finally started working, I remember doing the Hoth stuff again of like the speeder, where you tie up the AT-AT.
Yeah.
And I remember doing that once. The obviously the first person shooting is way too hard to
It was
play.
very
But did you see that? It became the best-selling N64 game in 1997. Yes, even beating Mario 64.
That I did not know. But so yeah, this was a first-person shooter game before they figured out how to do first-person shooter games on a console.
Exactly. That's what I'm referencing right there.
Yeah.
That part was cool.
Well,
That's something that was interesting, that you go from outside view to inside.
This was a really great Battle of Hoth, and I do remember this. Like, this is visceral. Like moving the snow speeder around felt great.
It's the first time we ever did it too. Like, let's remember this is the dawn of 3D.
Well, you did it in 2D. Like the original Atari game had you doing this scene in 2D.
Yes, but I'm saying in 3D we've never done this.
This felt so much better. So this was great. The only thing that was weird is when you did, attach the tow cable.
There you go.
It switches
Timing.
to this third-party weird thing.
And you always hit the leg
you
and kill
always hit
yourself.
the leg.
But the distinct thing I remember about this game is obviously Nintendo Power had the exclusive on this, and I read every bit of it.
So you know all about Dash Rendar.
I know all about Dash Rendar. I'm so glad you brought him up. Specifically, I knew that Dash Rendar eventually got to ride a speeder bike. If you could get there, and I could never get there because of how clunky everything was.
I think
And
that
I've
was-
just never been a first-person shooter guy.
That was on the cover of the game, I think. I think there's a speeder. Yeah.
It's just a secret level. No, very few players have played.
No, I think that's just later.
Here, Dylan, try and scan through this a little bit. It's like this scene in the desert.
Yeah, so
There's Dash Rendar.
So this
And
is
I
a
remember this scene, but
first person kind of hybrid, and you had to like use the C buttons in weird ways.
Why is he dressed like Cable?
He doesn't.
Good X-Men.
He's so much bigger than I remember.
Yeah, why? He's a chunky
He's a
boy.
triangle.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, this is why no one ever got to the next level.
You had to fight an ATST on the ground.
Wow. And you didn't have a lightsaber like in Dark Forces 2.
No.
That I'm so glad you brought that up, because
That's what I
to
was waiting to
go in line with shareware, I remember all the Star Wars games that were flash based, and they were fun, man. And one specifically, what was it called? Dark Forces?
Well, Dark Forces
was a first-person
a Doom
shooter.
clone, essentially, on PC.
Yeah. I remember that. Can you look up Dark Forces?
So yeah, that was basic. I think it used the Doom engine or a modified version there.
The Doom or Quake engine, yes.
Yeah. The first one was Doom. It was
It definitely was after Quake came out, but it might have still used the Doom engine. I'm not
it
sure.
was a ray tracing quasi 3D.
Yeah, try that one. D.
The first one.
Yeah.
And
This could be a commercial.
see
We'll
this
talk about something else during it. So
You might want to get YouTube Premium.
I have it. I'll log into it.
No,
next
I'm
time.
messing with you.
But yeah, so
I like that. Gaming clubs, as in this was made. It's shareware, right?
I believe it was. Yeah, so this was made by LucasArts. Back when LucasArts was a game development studio, they made some cool stuff.
Tentacle?
Yeah,
Day of the Tentacle, is that them?
Day of the Tentacle.
They did Monkey Island, right? LucasArts.
Yes.
Yeah.
There we go. I remember hours and hours and hours of this. This was amazing to me.
Oh, this was tons of fun. It was effectively Doom.
Is this what you were
different
talking about, Steve?
Well, I'm talking about the sequel to this. So Dark Forces 2 is the subtitle is Jedi Knight.
Yeah,
And you play as Kyle Katarn, who I think is this character you play as in this game, if I remember correctly. And he has latent force powers, and he realizes he can wield a lightsaber. So you have a lightsaber as part of your first-person shooter arsenal.
yeah, that game made the jump to real 3D. That was the Quake 3 engine. I'm pretty
Okay,
sure.
that was quick.
Okay, so this is built on the Doom engine.
Yeah.
And
So
we're just in
everything's
an elevator.
everything's actually flat. But it looks Star Wars, man. They did a great job with
Yes,
the
it
textures. in
does.
this. Like you get that feel.
Oh, I remember hours and hours of this game, and I think it was free. I definitely played it for free.
It was not free.
Probably the first 4 levels were free.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, that's the whole game. Cool. And they're like, no, if you pay for it, you get another.
And see, it's funny. They just opened the door to that giant shaft to nowhere, but that is Star Wars. Like in the movie, they just have giant holes.
Yeah.
For no reason.
My God. That
Yeah.
I remember. I specifically remember that. I remember shooting
The Imperial
the
officers.
Imperial officers with the big old helmets.
Yeah.
Can we see Dark Forces 2, please?
Dark Forces 2 makes that leap. Yeah, it gets a little more in depth, and I remember because it jumped to third person with the lightsabers. You can't use a lightsaber in first person, right? That's just ludicrous, right?
I mean, you could try. It would not be as nearly as much fun.
Like the same YouTuber did this. So yeah, we see now we're in full 3D. Things are a bit different. Still first person in this shot.
Let's click through until we can see a lightsaber. Hey, there it is.
No, it is first person here. Okay.
What are you thinking of?
So the same game, you could pop the third person. It let you change the view. I'm pretty sure.
Interesting.
But this is neat.
So it's funny. There's a game that I love, and it's called Jet Force Gemini, and it's on is it on N64?
N64, I just bought it at your recommendation.
You did?
I have the cartridge sitting in my basement.
Yes, I love that game, and that game was kind of like Shadows in that you could choose. Oh yeah, there we go. You could choose which type of play you were going to do, third person or first person at any time, which I thought was so cool.
Yeah.
Like Stanley Tucci will tell us in a minute.
2 commercials. Wow. There you go.
Yeah, just anywhere in the middle. But I freaking loved this game. Like, this was a perfect kind of like Star Wars-esque. This was such an improvement on what they were trying to do with Shadows of the Empire. And it just works better. If you can forward it to some gameplay, please.
Yeah, it had cutscenes. It had
cutscenes.
cutscenes.
It was amazing. It was amazing.
How do they fit all these cutscenes on a cartridge?
Yeah, well, I think this was after the...
Expansion pack?
That's right, yeah.
Well, and this is all in engine, so that
I was mostly...
yeah.
You
Thank
see
you
how
for the
you're on
explanation.
Boss Lurg? Jump off a Boss Lurg.
Go.
Nope. Up. Just click any red that's not the one we're on. There we go. Oh yeah, you can play as the dog, which is pretty cool. But you can see how it was third person, but it worked.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was the cool thing about the dog that first of all, the fact that the dog is in it was great. Originally there was supposed to be a time skip where like they were kids and then they became adults and but the dog is in it, but this was so fun. And then you could actually have player 2 be that little dude on the top left.
Oh.
So that was another reason I loved it, was because you could 2-player this John. And you had to save these, but like big scary aliens and things like that. Click anywhere.
And really,
earlier,
two-player
trying to make
in
human
this
character.
era, like simultaneous.
Mizar's Palace.
That's a big deal. It's not
this
something.
game. This game was so cool to me.
I'm excited to get into it because like you were so hyped about it. I'm like, I'm buying this game.
Still so hype about
You
it.
still own the cartridge?
No, I got rid of everything.
Everything. Even the things you love that touched your soul.
Everything except for my heart. And it was fun because you could play like this and just mow people down or you could bring up that trigger. So that it was very much, this was like Resident Evil 4 before Resident Evil 4.
Oh, wow.
And like it was a bloodbath because you were fighting bugs.
Yeah.
So
So who cares if they die?
This feels like how 3D Mega Man X games should have played.
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
Little off top, but I can't recommend this game enough. I mean, it was so fun. And you're right, it was advanced for N64.
Is this
I think there was a re-release on Xbox.
Treasure?
It's rare.
Rare? Oh wow.
Yeah, this was what I think this might have been the last Rare title for Nintendo.
It was one of them. It was either this.
Well, no,
or,
Star Fox was. Star Fox Adventures.
yeah, on the GameCube. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh boy. So yeah, there's a lot of Star Wars feel in this though.
Yeah.
Yeah, the little droids, the furry companion.
Did
That's cool.
Star Trek really have any action whatsoever, or was it more just about diplomatic resolutions? Wasn't that the conceit of the show? Was we could talk this out?
Not particularly. It's always a misconception that a popular misconception that the show was only about diplomacy. The Next Generation, they tried to lean towards a more political approach to differentiate it. Like Gene wanted to differentiate it from the original series, which was a Western in space. It just didn't have as much action as a typical Western because they weren't standing in face to face with their enemies as much. But there was definitely a lot of ship-to-ship combat, which they didn't show a ton of because of the special effects budget.
I feel like
they didn't have the budget for it.
There's a turning point for TNG when the Borg came. And the Borg were like, all right, there's no diplomacy. This is just like a mindless killing machine. So we gotta shoot these things. We gotta make these new phasers. And so they had lots of
Let's
carnage.
check out the Borg.
Yeah, just like the Borg, any of it. It just jumps into basically the army.
It became.
You can just give me that
militarized.
history of the Borg is fine.
But like you
That'll give us stuff over top.
But you would still have this situation where you might have 26 episodes a year. You have 26 episodes a year of TNG. So 10 of them might have extended combat scenes.
Yeah, so there's a horror element involved in them, and a lot of body horror, honestly. Yeah. But look, it's photon torpedoes are hitting ships and things are blowing up, but we don't know their shields are too strong. We have to do a special phase alignment to get through them. There's just how do we shoot them harder?
Which is why I'm always. So I'm always upset that all the first-person shooter games for Star Trek that came out, I think there was one maybe that focused on the Borg as enemies, but they should have been the main, they should be the boss or the mini boss of every level.
And it seems like that is the case, especially because there is a relationship between the Borg Queen and Picard. I think that it desperately wants Picard. It even gets Picard at one point.
Yeah.
That's the conceit of one of the movies, isn't it?
Spoiler alert, a couple times.
So in the series itself, he was assimilated by the Borg, and it's a big deal. It's one of the biggest, most high-intensity arcs of the show.
Yeah.
And they rescue him, and they manage to unassimilate him, but he is haunted by the demons of that for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
Because he remembers what it's like to be connected to the hive mind of the Borg and all the voices, and once he's cut off, he's actually extremely lonely.
Really?
Yeah.
So one of my favorite things,
Picard season 3, and it's pretty cool.
I mean, one of my favorite things about Star Trek is definitely Next Generation, and specifically Picard as the ship's captain, right? It's one of the only characters I can think of that is wildly popular that was just a person who was kind of no nonsense and just doing his job. I love that the whole, Next Generation, I believe, ends with him finally joining the poker game because he was always working.
Yeah.
And he's, the job, it's just your hero is someone actually doing the right thing all the time, unapologetically, and just doing what needs to be done. And I just love that in a character. But boy, did he need to be the lead of a video game.
What? So while he's not the lead of this video game, the Star Trek Elite Forces. Yeah, Star Trek Elite Forces is probably the pinnacle of the first-person shooter games, and I believe the Borg are the main antagonists for that game.
Who made it?
Let me pull it back up. But and that Bridge Commander we looked at earlier, that was the old one.
Okay,
there's a newer one for VR.
What was it called?
Elite Forces 2.
Elite Forces 2.
Elite Force 2.
Elite Force.
You can give me the long.
Yeah, Star Trek Voyager Elite Force, and then Elite Forces 2 was the sequel. And the Voyager series dealt with them in the Delta Quadrant where the Borg home base was.
Hey,
that's interesting. So you're actually on the bridge with Picard, and you're Tuvok's there. Is that Tuvok and Picard in the same ship?
I don't think
or
that
just
was. I'm not sure if that was Picard.
Okay.
God, you remember loading screens?
Yeah.
That is definitely Tuvok.
Yeah. And
some guy that looks like Dylan McDermott.
But it looks like, he's going, they're checking out alien.
Not a bikini, of course.
What is this? Well, this is Star Trek Gone Mad, of course.
Yeah, you didn't actually see a lot of that on Star Trek post TOS, at least.
Again, because Gene Roddenberry was not involved anymore.
And that's the problem, Steve. That's what I'm talking about.
I'm not necessarily saying it was a problem, but things were different, and there were clashes on TNG about that
Oh, yeah.
as a whole thing. Like why Troy was in a bodysuit for the first 6 seasons.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny.
And 7 of 9 had to wear a corset that took 2 hours to get in and out of.
That was after he was dead, at least.
Yeah, but the guy that Rick Berman took over for him and he was like, keep doing it the way Gene would do it. And then that meant that all the planets had to have monocultures only and things like that.
Right.
Well, this makes sense.
Yeah, so going around
like
with
the
the
way this
tricorder,
looks,
like,
man.
this almost looks like a Metroid Prime,
Yeah.
which is an awesome place to take Star Trek, I think.
Yeah, that's a great.
Exploring new worlds and new civilizations.
And then shooting them in the face.
Yeah.
After you scan them for knowledge.
You got
So Metroid Prime is literally a hybrid of Star Trek and Star Wars.
It kind of is, yeah.
Especially now that she's the chosen one. The
Yes.
Chozo one. Look that up, kids.
It was she's half Chozo. She had Chozo DNA.
She had
infused in
Chozo
her?
blood infused.
She was raised by Chozo.
Yeah. So she's culturally Chozo.
She's culturally Chozo. Yes!
She was raised by the Chozo. Chosen by it.
So, well, something definitely happened with her Chozo blood in Dread,
Yeah.
because that's why she was able to rise up and defeat like a rogue, still alive Chozo or something like
This
that.
looks, did you play
Because
this
you are
game,
my
Steve?
daughter. Oh yeah.
I pirated this years ago and only played a little bit. I really want to go back and play it now though, because
It looks cool.
Yeah, it looks great.
Now we're just, at first we were like, there are no good Star Trek games. And now we're like, wait a minute. I gotta...
So this is one I've always heard about as a pinnacle of the FPS ones.
Okay.
I couldn't get it in front of my computer. That's why I didn't actually play it.
Yeah.
I pirated it, but I couldn't get it to work.
Yeah, it looks like pretty hi-fi for the era.
Yeah, let's see a different part that's not in green.
And then there's a Star Trek Armada series of games. I think one of them was on Xbox, the original Xbox. And those were like those are like Star Fox style, like space shooters.
So this looks
That
like
looks
it's got,
like Andros.
it's human Andros.
That looks great.
So this, it looks like it has cutscenes and dialogue.
It's a fully fledged like Quake clone, but with all the Star Trek trappings, like the different phasers, and they're all like canonically, at least the basic phasers are canonically accurate.
Yeah. You need that. It has to be canonically
There's
accurate.
like type 1 and 2, and I think
Well,
3
you know
phasers,
what?
and then
It
they
does
added like
have to
type
be.
8, which is a BFG.
It does have to be canonically accurate because we would notice. That's
Well,
the
yeah.
big thing about. And honestly, I know Star Wars more than Star Trek is in the news often about like, nerd rage, but it's just like because it's not accurate to what you told us. Like a lot of it is being upset about that sort of thing.
But I kind of came to a personal realization about that recently. It's like, especially now with like the younger nerds and the younger culture in general having their own touch points.
I'm sorry. Just hit the back button
let me
like
see
3
that again.
times. Just like the space bar or whatever. Yeah. Watch this.
They open the door.
This is Star Trek. Boom. See ya. Hey, lady, goodbye. Lady, goodbye.
Hey, Star Trek captains are
Who are we
supposed to use
playing?
diplomacy first.
Who are
If
we
they
playing?
shoot at you shoot back. They're not pacifists. They just try.
Are we playing as Gene Roddenberry?
I'm assuming you're playing as part of the Voyager crew because that's the only way that would make sense.
It looks like Halo-esque.
It's a little pre-Halo though, I believe. Like this is definitely a Quake style engine, if not the Quake.
the
engine.
textures are definitely beyond the first Halo, though.
You know what I want, and I'm gonna pray it exists. I'm gonna have Dylan Google it. Is that a phaser?
Yeah.
That's sick.
Yeah, that's a Type 1 phaser.
Is I want to know: is there a Marvel versus Capcom clone that is Star Wars versus Star Trek?
There's not, but there's probably a
Star Wars
a Mugen
versus-
emulator
That's it. No. Let me help you out. Star Wars versus Star Trek
fighting
Mugen.
game.
Yeah, Mugen, there you go.
Yeah, there's definitely a Mugen of it. There has
Star
to be.
Trek.
Yeah,
Trek.
yeah. Tech 5 was the engine.
Okay.
And then M
Oh, wow.
U
So,
G E
yeah,
N.
later.
Tech 3.
Okay. That makes more sense.
Bingo. Give me face off. Oh no, that's fuck. Oops, sorry, kids. There you go. Mugen Star Trek. Let me see that.
My battle.
So Mugen is one of my favorite things. I think we did an earlier episode
Yeah,
on
we
it.
We talked about it a
about
bit, yeah.
But Mugen is a crazy cool thing that I love, where you can just have anybody versus anybody, and it's all fan made. Like you take a skin from a Street Fighter through Marvel vs. Capcom, and you just change it a little bit so that you can have things like this. Yes, that is, and they're the same character. So just
I'm pretty sure they're both Captain America, Cyclops from Children of Adam. I feel like are their bases.
Oh no! Look at that block with the knee up.
Those might actually be.
What was that? Did you see that? That
custom.
looked like an axe.
Yeah, it was an axe. Those might be customs. Yeah, those are definitely custom sprites because they don't have as many frames as like any game of the era.
This speaks to what I'm talking about when it comes to these two particular fan bases. Is they go above and beyond with knowing how to do this.
Wait, no. I would call foul because Kirk has not done a double axe handle yet.
Oh, what was that? That looked like a repulsor blast.
That was a repulsor blast. He has not done a double axe handle. How dare they?
Yeah, that's
Oh yeah. Isn't that how he defeats the lizard?
That's how he defeats everybody he fights hand to hand. That's his finishing move.
Yeah, so he has to do that in this fight.
What's stronger than punching with one hand? Punching with both hands at the same time.
From above. It's beautiful.
This is my love of this fan base though. This is a fan base that knows how to program.
Yeah.
I guess well you're both in the
kaiju
program.
size? I just noticed that they're fighting on a street and like
Yeah, they are kaiju size.
Well, you guys are both from the programming world. Why is there such a love of Star Trek?
Well, so he's dabbled, but not
I've tried to dabble, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think like you said, like the nerds tend to be into Star Trek. Nerds will also be into Star Wars. Geeks can also be into both. But all those types of people love technology, especially in the 80s and 90s, because that was our way to connect with each other, other people that were like-minded, and also ways to, I feel like, have control over you can control your world a little bit. If you can build it, you can control it. I don't know how that feels.
I'll get a little bit more into the psychology of it. Here's my theory. So I loved Star Trek specifically because it presented a world where everything had its place, where you're on the ship and the ship works and there's a federation and there's a chain of command and everything works how it's supposed to. And when things go off, oh no, it sucks, but you fix it, right?
Because you have a manual tells you how to
There's a manual. There is a prescribed way to fix things, and if not, you figure it out. It's all about restoring order to the universe, putting things in their place. That's what Star Trek feels like to me. Sitting on a bridge is like, okay, I can change things as I see fit. But Star Wars is like, no one's in command. There's the Empire, and they're trying to do this, but they're the bad guys. They're killing people, and you're just like these rebels. You're basically terrorists. You're blowing things up. You're killing dudes, and just like no one's in charge. It's the Wild West. You go to Tatooine, they don't care about either. They're just they got gangsters running things. It's nuts.
Gangsters and multicolored scooters.
So it's in many ways to nerds, I think, more complicated, and people are into that as well. But it's not a place I want to live. I want to live on the Enterprise. I don't want to live on Tatooine.
You want to visit Tatooine,
right?
With the Enterprise.
Dylan, you could just scroll through a couple
down,
of other
visit, beam back up,
mutants.
and
So probably just stay in this playlist, but see if you can find another. Here, come on, hit the back button so
I
that
don't
we
even
can
know what
see
game
the other.
that Fireball was sourced from.
And let's just see some
Kirk
of the
definitely
other
had Magneto's
mutant
powers
ones.
from a.
See where it says. Did you mean? Just hit that. Sorry, mouse down a little bit, and right up to where it says "Did you mean?" right above you. Thank you. And give me Vader and Anakin versus Doctor Doom and Spider-Man.
Oh, there you go. That's what we're looking
Yeah. This is what I'm talking about when it comes to Mugen.
Yeah, this is gonna be the good stuff.
Oh man, we didn't even get into the. Was he Australian or was that just really bad digitization?
Well,
I think it was
give me before this, Dylan, right where the character selection screen is.
Was that as many squares as I thought it was?
Yep. Looks like we're going into it. Well, actually, I can fill this ad with a question. Silicon Valley side of things, is that a more Star Trek or Star Warsian area?
From the outside, I feel like it's Star Trek, but Chris would know better than that.
Yeah.
Trek's the ideal.
Hell yeah.
Trek's the ideal, but a lot of it feels more like Star Wars, to be honest. Just like espionage and
I wasn't even thinking of that.
take ideas from and implement them faster and better than other people. And you're basically trying to undercut other people. A lot of it's like, oh, if I don't have a good idea, I'm going to take someone else's better idea and just implement it better. And that feels a little more
I was going to say a lot of Jabba the Hutts out there.
A little Lando involved as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not as cool as Lando, though.
Well, everyone's favorite is Han Solo, and he's the smuggler. He's the kind of bad guy. He's morally ambiguous. Whereas you know what? That is something about Star Trek. There's pretty dedicated morals.
There are
in Star Trek. I feel like the good guys are good.
I mean, that's how it used to be in Star Wars.
I mean, I guess Quark is kind of in between. But
Yeah, Quark is, more of a mercenary.
Yeah.
But also,
Quark
I
is
think...
basically a Hutt.
He's big. But the old DS9 was also more about moral ambiguity because even Cisco was the commander of the station from the Federation, but he's far from the Federation.
And with all sorts of peoples and cultures that were either enemies or they didn't, or unknowns.
There was a lot of gray in Cisco, and a lot of his solutions would be like, well, he'd be like, well, I'm going to offer you this deal. And they'd be like, well, that doesn't sound very Federation. He's like, well, the Federation doesn't have to know. And like, that would be the solution.
Yeah.
They'd work out something and he'd be like,
well, that sounds like Silicon Valley.
yeah. So yeah, I would say DS9 of the Trek series would probably be the closest. Yeah,
it was definitely modeled like the different designs of the different, especially the newer aliens. They were definitely, Star Trekky, Star Warsian design. Like they had the, nobody had head tails. There were a Darth of head tails, but
this is awesome. But Dr. Doom fighting Darth Vader,
and Darth Vader and Anakin Skywalker, like they're together. See, I love this because a lot of this is custom.
Oh yeah,
as far as like they're putting on a show here. And I like that they're different sprite mechanics. Like the Anakin is definitely a Clone Wars version. Like he's supposed to look CGI, like the show.
Well, that's like that's like a Game Boy Advance sprite that they pulled from some other game. Almost certainly.
Dude, this is the best. I'm so excited.
And I also love that there's a Rancor in the background who was polygonal, but I'm pretty sure that's just a 2D just rip of the 3D Rancor from some other Star Wars game.
Like a GIF of the...
Yeah.
Like the After Effects, they very well may have.
Yeah, because that's a 2D background, but that was from a polygon.
This is wild.
And this Darth Vader looks pretty good. Like
Darth Vader looks good. His move animation looks bad though. Like,
yeah, something's off with the
well,
Sith.
whoever did it was not an artist, and that's the other thing. Like the nerds, they ain't artists.
There's really wanted Darth
great
Vader in the
point.
game.
Well, and God, this is just a perfect. You guys have brought in fantastic conversations because this is like speaking to something. This is literally speaking to what I deem is the problem with fandom right now. Is we have too much fandom that are not geeks and nerds anymore, where they're pushing it forward. It used to be you could count on Star Wars fanfic actually being amazing. You could count on Star Trek people coming up with a literal flying drone of the Enterprise. They're going to figure it out. Whereas now, I don't know as many geeks with these kinds of nerds. I don't know as many geeks with these kinds of skills anymore. Like literally, my friggin' origin story is, I'm too goofy and nerdy and strange to ever get on camera or ever get something done. So I have to write, produce, direct, and edit everything if I want to be involved. Which is for these folks, if you want to be involved in game design or you want to be involved in Star Wars or Star Trek, you make your own. Because they're not going to let you in. They're not going to let in people like us. That's like the conceit of nerds and geeks, in my opinion, is there's no way they're going to let me in, so I got to do it over here with nothing.
I mean, and
figure out how to do all of it.
And
ideally find more like-minded individuals to help me.
Like I can see where you're coming from. I feel like there was a weird. I feel like we're stuck in a generational gap between people that were doing whatever they wanted in the 60s and 70s, like the Lucases. They're like, I'm going to get it done. I'm going to, Spielberg and worked on that with into a Coppola. Like, we want to get this done, this cool thing, we're going to do it. And then we had our generation where we see that stuff, but we want to do it and we can't because there's a media machine. And then there's younger people now that are like, early 20s, late 20s, or teens even, that are like, I can do it myself without any of this, using platforms that were built by people like us in our generation.
Yeah.
They get to put themselves on camera. They get to make their own content, but in a way that we don't even see, like all the TikTok stuff and their ages of YouTube.
Yeah,
It's age-gated.
We're not even thinking it exists because we're like, why would we look for content in a TikTok?
Well, in my opinion, it's actually, in my opinion,
That's not what it's for.
In my opinion, it's age gated both ways, though.
Yeah.
In that the age gate below is they're not going to let me in, so I'll do it this way. But this way is a consumer version of doing it. Whereas
but that's
I want to
all
do
there is.
I want to do the. Whereas upwards, it's like you had to for me to even get a camera, I had to work at a TV station. So automatically, I had to become a professional and be able to do things beyond what consumer can do. I'm sure it was the same for you in computers.
Yeah. I mean, I just, scrimped and saved and built my first computer in college, really, and they were very expensive back then, very much less attainable than they are now.
And his 4-year-old cell phone could run laps around that computer that he built.
Yes.
Back then. But so I meant more like age gap as in like if we were born a generation later or 10 years later.
Oh, I agree.
You would have those same access to the same commercial stuff. But you also still have that ability, like kids now still have the ability to do it from the ground up themselves. Work at a place to get it, but they don't necessarily need a TV camera because they got a phone. But people with TV cameras or with professional cameras are going to have more professional bent.
Yeah, what impresses me though is stuff like this, like video game,
like homegrown stuff like that.
Yes, video game and computer programming will always impress me because, like Chris said, it was not available. You were deciding, I'm going all in on something that I don't even know how like a board works. I have to rip something apart to learn how that works. Whereas instead of, installing designing a website on Squarespace, for example, versus how it used to be, big difference. Now there's kind of training wheels. When you were doing it.
But I mean, you can still build it from the ground up too.
Sure.
It depends on it depends what the motivations are. Like your motivations were, like you said, you wanted to do it the way you wanted to do it.
Yep.
And you didn't have stuff like Squarespace to be able to do it. Or like before Mugen came out, there was no way for somebody to say, "Oh, I want to have a fighting game with Anakin in it," unless you made a fighting game company. You made a fighting game with Anakin in it and got a license from LucasArts.
But I suppose that's what's so impressive about this stuff.
McDermott. I'm sorry. That's what's his face? That's the actor Dylan McDermott. They stole his face and put it in this game. Sorry.
I think what for this fan base though, what is so impressive to me is a lot of this stuff was made in the desert of no content. When we weren't getting the content, these guys figured out a way to do it and not do it of like, I'm going to draw a bunch of pictures. They made a game. That's crazy to me that they just created something in a shareware and I got to play it for free. And it sat there right alongside my copy of Mortal Wombat, which was a great shareware game if you've ever seen that.
Well, I think
it's just impressive.
One of the things though about the culture war you're describing, just like you mentioned getting sick of some of the nerd stuff coming out, like getting tired of the comic book movies. But I think a lot of that is like they listened to the audience. The audience was like, "Hey, I want this," and they're like, "Okay, we'll give you that." And then we're like, "Well, not like that." They're like, "Well, tell me." The thing is, I think you need direction from the top, not listening to the fan base. I think the fan base probably gets too much attention in general now because social media, everyone's got a platform now. And that's great for many things. But I think for creators, I think you need a certain level of removal.
Well, it's also on businesses too. Like you don't want to hear how you should make ice cream. It's like the audience is great, but there is a different tier of audience when they're audience/peers, let's say. And maybe they might have some more valuable information about how to do something at this level than the guy that just comes in and is like, I feel like this would be better with peanut butter. There's a different level of thought that goes into that.
And like part of the problem that I'm sure these studios sometimes deal with, depending on how greedy they want to be, that they sometimes deal with, of like, oh, the guy comes in and says, "I want more peanut butter in my Star Wars." And you're like, no, back in the day, 20 years ago, you'd have been like, okay, whatever. One guy wants more peanut butter. But nowadays, that guy will go and make a streaming, documentary about how you won't listen to his peanut butter idea or how more peanut butter needs to be included. Or he'll go on Twitter and other people say, "Yeah, I also want some peanut butter and some jelly." And
we got a change.org petition with 20,000 signatures about more peanut butter.
Like there's a lot more cultural pressure. So they're like, we could go the easy route and just bend to what our metrics show us is more cultural pressure and make more money that way, hopefully, or we can not and then stick to our creative gun.
Well, then you get into a situation where George Lucas is like, Well, hold on. There was never been peanut butter in Star Wars. That's not even this.
Yeah.
Whereas Disney now will say, oh, yeah, we'll put peanut butter in instead of Luke Skywalker. That's what the people want. And then everyone's like, what?
I mean,
what did you do?
I like that analogy, except for the fact that George Lucas definitely put some crunchy peanut butter in there with the Hound Shot First stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, he had some of his own revisionism.
That is true. And that is also due to probably listening to someone saying, himself in this case, his conceit, and one thing that has always made adult nerds mad about Star Wars is George Lucas himself describes it as a children's story, which it very much was designed to be. That's why we all fell in love with it when we were 8. You know, it holds up what he was doing, and maybe that's because maybe they just made children's movies a little differently. Maybe they were a little more mature and like more. They took that all audiences
visually
seriously.
arresting. I think that was a huge part of it.
True, but you know the basics of storytelling were there. They didn't turn it into what I think we have now is emotional beats only, and not an overarching
Like storytelling
plan.
beats instead. Like,
Yeah, and instead of this will hit hard with this demographic on this social media platform, which I don't knock business, but it sucks.
I knock business. I'll make it official.
But you're right on. I think a lot of it is listening to the audience and knowing when not to do that.
Yeah.
And also, is it even an artistic endeavor anymore if you're doing it based on popular opinion?
Yeah. And
Yeah, and I think the last 3 official mainline Star Wars are a syndrome of that. Like you see, there wasn't an overarching plan, or there were 3 different overarching plans, right? The first
or the plan was remake the first one.
yeah, and then yeah, so they made the first one, and people were like, "Hey, this is pretty good. It reminds me of Episode 4, but that's nothing bad about that. Great." They made the second one, Nerd Rage. Nerds are very upset, and they're like, don't do that. So they had a plan. They threw that plan away.
Mm-hmm.
They made the 9th one, which in my opinion is one of the worst movies ever made. And that came out.
An amazing correction, though. If you look at the mental math that had to be done.
Yeah, so they took all the things they set up in the episode 8, threw it away, put up some nonsense on screen. And so all the nerds who are like, well, I hated episode 8, but not like that.
I remember watching it and being like, oh, there's the tether from 7 and 9.
Yeah.
7 and 9. Yeah, 8 is the one. You know, 8 deserves a podcast in itself because I truly hate that movie. And I think that was like turning its back on what 7 was trying to do. So I would actually argue that 8 turning its back on what 7 set up is what resulted in 9 having to somehow make it work because both sides were.
I would
it's a
say
crazy thing that happened. I can't believe it happened.
I don't
still.
like 8 or 9. I like 8 better because at least it had
it tried
a
to
goal. It tried to do something.
It took a shot.
And then
It
it
missed.
took a shot.
And then 9 slipped and fell face first into the
And 9 was just like,
Yeah.
it was just inscrutable.
It's one of the biggest producing snafus ever because it divided an unbreakable alliance of Star Wars nerds.
I would not say Star Wars nerds were ever unbreakable. There's never.
No, I would. Up until then, we were still in. And I think that broke us.
I don't know. You know, I saw a lot of detraction about 7, which was warranted. Some of it was not warranted, maybe not warranted, or maybe just personal feelings. But a lot of people, like myself included, were like, "This is just A New Hope over again." Mm-hmm. I didn't want a new Star Wars movie to be A New Hope all over again. Because if I can watch A New Hope for that. And some people are like, "Oh, I loved it because it was A New Hope all over again." Yeah. But to me, that's already a schism forming.
I think it's a smaller schism than what 8 did.
Well, smaller, yeah.
Because I've never seen anything like that. And you know why I could challenge that? Very simply, everyone was so excited after the trailers for 8. But then the movies came out and it crushed everything. As far as I've just never seen such sadness.
My favorite dangling plot line from that whole thing is at the end of episode 8, they show force sensitivity in the populace.
Yes.
Right? They show the little boy, the slave boy with the broom, can move the broom. And they're like, oh man, we're just discovering that there's force sensitivity everywhere. They never mention any of that in episode 9. They're just like, that didn't happen.
One fix.
That was supposed to be its own spin-off that's quietly disappeared.
One fix for me for episode 9 would have just been, Palpatine returned and sucked up all the force from everybody else. Or something. Even a throwaway dumb line would have been better than the planned, written, and filmed and CGI'd dumbness we got from that.
And to be fair, I mean, I know a lot of people felt the same way about when Star Trek came back. That first, what was the first series? Discovery?
Discovery, yeah.
Like season 1 of Discovery, I know was met with confusion.
And
then Picard was met with no.
Well,
like that's not him. Well, but by season 3, from what I understand, people kind of got back on board.
Yeah. So part of the thing with Picard is it started like 30 years later in universe, and he's been disgraced basically, or like jumped out of Starfleet as a respectable captain, not through any real fault of his own. But people are like, oh, he's this old doddering man, and then the old man's like, I'm going to be the old Picard I was, and everybody's like, F you, sit down, you're not anybody,
literally.
And then and then spoiler alert, he became a cyborg. How we got from there, from old man trying to redeem himself to cyborg, was very silly and very dumb.
But also the conceit of that old man, doddered old man. No, that's one of the greatest captains ever.
Well, so like,
and that's how it if anything, put a plaque of him up on the wall and give me a new character if you're going to just disgrace it like that and act like somehow he fucked it up.
Well, so that's the thing. Like,
no, he didn't. He's the greatest captain ever.
Well, I'm saying like not to get too much into it, but like, and I actually liked it because it was showing that Starfleet and the Federation were going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Picard wasn't, and that's what the falling out was. Picard was the stiff moral compass, and they veered off course.
Which is interesting.
Yeah. And then they kind of dropped that plot for some Mass Effect Leviathan.
Langoliers. Literal Langoliers.
Yeah, that shit, yeah.
I thought they dropped the plot because all of a sudden the producer of Star Wars were like, are they talking about us? Is this about us?
But like, but like the first half of this first season of Picard was literally about, oh, is Picard wrong? And it's like, no, the people, they are the ones who are wrong.
No, it's the children.
It's the Federation who is wrong. And they tell you why, but the reason why is because of some weird existential eldritch horror, which didn't make much sense.
So they didn't, but I think Steve and I at least will probably agree that the best new Star Trek, there is good new Star Trek, is The Lower Decks, which is an animated series based on Star Trek. Are you going to say Brave New World?
They're different enough. I'm like, both of them are my favorites. Yeah. That's Strange New World.
Strange New World, sorry.
Yeah.
But so there's new stuff that is good in Star Trek. Yeah. Probably less in Star Wars right now.
And I don't know. I don't know what's happening basically in Ahsoka.
And to tie back to the topic about video games, another great Star Trek show, which was unfortunately canceled because of budgetary reasons, Star Trek Prodigy, which was a kid-focused Star Trek show, which basically the first episode is Star Trek Rebels, and then the rest of it is Star Wars Rebels. The rest of it is a Star Trek show. It was great. They made a video game, an action adventure game based off of that, which is really fun for if you're like not our age and haven't played that game for 30 years.
Dylan, give me Star Trek Prodigy game.
Like if you ever played any kind of beat 'em up game on the PlayStation, that's basically what it is gameplay wise.
Yeah.
So I haven't played it myself. I'm like, that's old hat. But the fact that they made a game like that for a younger generation, I loved
that one right there, Nintendo Switch.
Yeah.
I didn't even know this came out.
Yeah, it came out about this time last year. Like when the first season ended, they put this out.
It already looks better.
And Janeway's in it.
Oh, yeah.
That's hilarious. Not all images appear in game.
Yeah.
That's like what's going on with those movies and whatnot.
Yeah.
Ultimately,
because that's a shot from the intro. That's why there's like it's not in game, because those were shots from the intro of the show.
Ultimately, I think everything you love gets corrupted when it goes mainstream. That's just the nature of things. There's very few and far between that can maintain their, I don't want to say cred, because you can be mainstream and make a great thing, but you definitely are now beholden to a larger audience.
Well, so what I was going to say a couple minutes ago, I do agree with you on that point, but I also think that as the quote-unquote old guard of the nerds and the geeks, that we protest too much about things that as we remember them and we love them as they were back then. Mm-hmm. Things change as they go forward. So they're not necessarily going to be that way going forward.
Yeah.
I feel like part of the reason it's painful for me to see some of these things go the way they do is because you can, like you said, you can see where the marketing.
Does that say Nickelodeon?
Yeah, it's a Nickelodeon co-production. You can see where the money pressures basically start pulling on it, where it could be going this one way, and like with Transformers, not go too far off topic, it was it was also a similar moral fiber tying all those Transformers stories together in the 80s and 90s. And then suddenly Michael Bay's like, I'm going to make it about big robot blowing things up and Megan Fox. And it's like, that makes money. Moralizing robots doesn't. So they started going more and more that way. And other movies,
moralizing
robots, yeah.
And to put that into context, this is entirely a property that started with the express purpose of selling toys.
Yeah.
That's the only reason Transformers exists. But there was this moral through line that was then abandoned.
Because a Marvel writer was given the task of making backstories, and he made a cohesive backstory that made sense in universe.
But also, that was a thing that we fell in love with. It's almost like a fan fiction brought to life. It's someone taking the things that we think are corny. No. It's about taking things that the outside world thinks is like dumb or just for kids and putting passion and care into it and creating something that is truly beautiful. Even though it started as this, they become so much more that when they try and turn it back around and go back to this, it can get a little tricky. One property has navigated this beautifully, and it's right in front of me. Mario, because Mario had it. Think about it. Think about it started and was amazing. The movie came out, we had a dip. And then it continued to go back up and we had a dip. I feel like it navigates what hardcore fans and children love about these characters. It's never been lost.
I don't quite agree.
See, I agree in the sense that it's always fun and it's always got the core. The core of what Mario is has never really changed. Yeah. And that is largely because it's had the same guy at the helm the entire time.
Miyamoto's been around.
Miyamoto.
Still around the whole way.
Still around. And you know, he puts his thumbprint on it, and you can tell, like, he's like, no, this is about play, right? And if you're not playing, if it's not fun to move him around, it's not a Mario game.
And, you know, that same guy had his hands around the movie that I love so much, and it had the same vibe. Like, it's almost like a lot of these properties just need to do a vibe check every once in a while with, are we remaining one with our original intention and goals? If we need to change, are we changing so drastically that it's not the original thing that everyone loved? And if that's the case, can we just make a new thing?
Yeah.
You know, this is a weird analogy, but if Mighty Number 9 worked, that would have made perfect sense of like, okay, it's not Mega Man anymore.
Mighty Number.
Let me just jump off and have it be a different thing.
Because that was a great example. Yeah, if that worked, fantastic.
But it didn't.
But it didn't.
But at the same time, again, like Nintendo doesn't bow to money pressures. Me and Chris were just talking about this earlier. Like Nintendo has a very successful company. They have a lot of name cachet, and even amongst people that don't know video games,
money in the bank.
They know Nintendo makes a good
most
game.
other companies.
Yeah, nobody's gonna buy Nintendo out from under. Because they can fight off any challenge. Like they have the ability to do this.
I distinctly remember when the Wii came out. And there was conversations in the same circle as like Apple and Nintendo were in the same conversation. Both of them, I remember, had the same financial strategy, which is hoard giant savings accounts, which allows them to continue to do what they want and have leverage. You know, they don't have to bow down to anybody's whim, which has resulted in some duds, of course. But also it creates
the fact they're allowed to make duds is great. Like EA for 20 years now. Anything that does not overperform with EA gets thrown under the bus. And you lose all sorts of great... And unfortunately, they make a lot of the Star Wars games, too, which is why a lot of the Star Wars games we haven't even talked about that EA made because they're fair to middling because they're afraid to try anything new, afraid to try anything outside the box because they know that as soon as they mess up, they're getting tossed back in the toy chest with Woody and Buzz in it.
And to your point, back in the 70s and 60s when they were making all of this stuff, they didn't have the concern of we have to appeal to financial pressures because they had nothing to begin with. It was just, you were just pushing whimsy because there was no rules when you have nothing.
Yeah, I mean, they had to, get investors to make the movie. Like, it was still Star Wars was an expensive movie to make.
Yeah, but that was the cocaine era. You just get somebody has enough cocaine, they'll give you $100 million to make a movie. Well, the equivalent of $100 million. So they weren't giving that much.
They didn't believe in it. The student, they didn't believe in it at all. And so Lucas was able to do what he wants. Now, perfect example, that gets you the prequels.
Right.
So there's dark sides to all of this. So
yeah, the dark side is that the prequels were made in the first place. I agree.
Yeah.
I know that's wasn't your point.
No. It kind of can be, though, is like there's two sides to this story. I mean, I think you need to be in a vacuum of being able to do whatever you want to create something truly great. But at the same time, if you're left without any restrictions at all, you have the directors who go insane. because they have unlimited power and they do things that probably needed a check. I mean, this is why this is checks and balances. This is a thing. You need someone to bump you every once in a while, be it the audience or be it someone in your cabinet, ideally both.
So you need an artistic vision tempered with collaboration. You need both. And if you don't have both, you get something wacky and weird. And so a lot of what we're seeing is just collaboration, no artistic vision.
Yeah, I've never put it like that.
You mean collaboration or compromise?
One of the same, I would argue.
Both. At some point, you got to just be a guy in a room with a pencil and think of something to do. It can't just be, well, what do you want to do? Well, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? Someone's got to, vision helps. I love the way you just put that. That was well stated. Well stated. That's stated from a man of integrity, who's also a nerd. Before we wrap up, I would like to just open the door to what happened to Star Wars games, because I believe there's one that's well received. I don't want to say Jedi Outcast, but
Force Unleashed.
Whatever the most recent one is Jedi Outcast?
Yeah, it's Jedi Outcast 2. The one that's like Dark Souls.
Yeah, well, no, Force Unleashed was one like 10 years ago. Yeah, it was Jedi Outcast 2.
Jedi Outcast 2.
Yeah, with the kid from
Jedi Outcast 1.
Shameless on it. Yeah.
Shameless, yeah.
Yeah.
And Battlefront, I guess, is the other one.
Battlefront was the space combat one.
Yeah.
I played that a little bit. It was fun. It was very soulless. And I was like,
That's exactly what we were talking about.
yeah, because I wanted to play a space combat game, and I'm like, cool. And the controls were, it felt like playing Battlefield, but you can kind of go in the third dimension, but not really, because you had to rotate the ship, and then you can pitch. It was airplanes in space,
Yeah.
which is not a fun way to do a space shooter, in my opinion.
Star Fox.
I mean, Star Fox has a little bit of that too, which is also I love Star Fox a lot. I'm like, if I'm in space, I want to fly in 3 dimensions. It's hard to do with controllers, not impossible. This game I used to play called Freelancer, that had that combat, and it was perfect. And it didn't sell any money, so nobody does anything like it anymore. But yeah, and then Jedi Outcast, it sells pretty well. It gets good critical reviews. People like playing it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also the type of game where you play 8 hours of it, you're done the story, you don't play it anymore because you've experienced everything. EA doesn't like that type of game because it doesn't make them gobs of money. It's not a live service, and it's not something they can sell DLC for. Sell cosmetics.
Was Battlefront the loot crate issue?
Yeah.
That was like the Call of Duty-esque Star Wars-y.
Yeah, if you want to play as Darth Vader, you had to play for 10,000 hours or pay a bunch of money to gamble for the loot box of them.
Wow.
Or something like that. Yeah, like the early in game was thousands of hours.
That's too many hours.
That's too many.
Yeah?
I'd agree.
I'm a huge fan of both these properties.
That is Battlefront. I was talking about Star Wars Squadrons.
Yeah.
The space shooter. Sorry. Yeah. Which is more recent than Battlefront.
What was the one? There was one that had a really cool logo. And this is so stupid, but I remember it was like the marketing material for it was, like in high school, you would take a black marker. You guys probably wouldn't. I didn't even do it. But you would take a black marker and just start painting down all of the lockers so that there was one black line across. The marketing material for this game, which I think was Force Unleashed 2, was somebody doing it with a lightsaber. Like he was like the bad kid.
Yeah.
Because I think that was the game where you got to play as like the bad boy.
Yeah. You play
Darth
as
Vader's
Darth Apprentice, right? Yeah.
What was that called?
It should have been Force Unleashed.
The Force
Unleashed.
Force
2.
You just look up Force Unleashed.
Force Unleashed 2.
Force Unleashed. And that was, I remember one of the big things was Force pulling a TIE fighter was one of the big visuals for that one.
And that was the guy from that show with the...
Give me the E3 trailer. It's
That
fine.
lived in a house together.
Remember E3?
Ah, I remember that.
You guys told me recently that that's not a thing.
Yep. Did not happen this year.
But yes, this game specifically, and oh my God, Knights of the Old Republic, we didn't even get to. We'll have to do a round 2 on this discussion because I'm sure we're underway.
Yeah, so they both have big MMOs that are still going now. Star Trek Online and Star Trek The Old Republic.
Yeah.
So it's not Knights of, it's just The Old Republic, but it's set like 1,000 years after the Old Republic, Knights of the Old Republic games, I believe. So Darth Revan's already been a thing. I think Darth Bane might be one of the bad guys around in it.
I like that. The rule of 2. God, there's just so much to this stuff, and it's so cool and interesting and fun, and I'm glad that it exists. I think it definitely has a special place in my heart. I'm sad that don't really feel as connected to it as I did, but I'm definitely connected to the idea of whatever your nerd flag is, flying it proudly and doing whatever it takes to kind of enjoy it and bring more to it. Like, I'm sure this guy was like, man, Sith is so metal and cool. I want to play as that guy. And he did it.
Yeah.
Makes me happy.
Be the change you want to see in the pop culture world, I would say. Yeah. Make it. Make a fan video.
Except he becomes a good guy at the end. Spoiler.
Hey.
Doesn't always happen. Usually we go the other way. Any other thoughts?
No, I want to go home and play some video games.
Yeah.
Chris can go and play FTL, the best Star Trek sim that we haven't
didn't even
gotten.
get to that, but yeah. FTL.
Oh, the big one that was in the arcades with the joystick?
It's an indie PC game.
It's an indie PC game that is very much akin to that old Star Trek game we were looking at about managing a spaceship through various explosions.
I think this is definitely worthy of a round 2. So for all you Star Wars, Star Trek nerds out there, we will have a deeper dive on this next time on Tubby Talk.
See you later.
But not literally the next one. We're going to do some episodes about other things. We'll find our way back to this. Or maybe we'll at least have the Star Wars second. Or the Star Trek minute.
Time is a circle. Yeah.
Time is
flat circle. It's got to be flat. Otherwise, it's sphere.
Bye, everybody.
YUNKJunk!